So I want to start my part here, Rays of the One Light, weekly commentaries on the Bible and the Bhagavad Gita by Swami Kriyananda. These are readings that we do every week, something that Yogananda started to compare the Bible and the Bhagavad Gita and show the oneness and the truth behind all great teachings. And so we take the Bible as representing the West, the Bhagavad Gita representing the East. This week, 24, How Devotees Rise. Last week, Ram told us very wonderfully how devotees fall. So luckily, this is the next one, How They Rise. Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda. Last week we asked the question, why do devotees fall? And we considered the downfall of Judas in this context. Jesus, in answer to Judas's criticism for allowing Mary to rub his feet with spikenard, a very costly ointment, said, "The poor always ye have with you, but me ye have not always." Jesus is saying here that there is one supreme injustice that needs eradication. Poverty, yes, but not of a material kind. Poverty in a spiritual sense. Divine blessings are not common in this world. They are extraordinary. When they come, we should give them priority above every other consideration. Never allow a moment of inner joy, for instance, to be set aside for lesser duties. Divine attunement is our highest priority. As Lahiri Mahashaya, the guru of Yogananda's guru, said, to listen to the heart's inner sound, Om, which issues from the very center of our being, is man's highest duty. Mary, on this occasion, was not communing in inner silence with Christ's Spirit, as she had been when Martha urged Jesus to reproach her for not helping out in the kitchen. Mary this time was serving outwardly, but in a very different spirit from the restless fussing for which Jesus had reprimanded her sister Martha. Those who see a radical difference between the paths of action and meditation should understand this distinction. To serve in the right spirit is necessary, for only thereby can we overcome our karmic tendencies toward restless activity. The important thing is that spirit be always inwardly focused, that in everything we do, we act in loving service to the Lord. Therefore, the Bhagavad Gita says in the 3rd chapter, the state of freedom from action, that is, of eternal rest in the spirit, cannot be achieved without action. No one, by mere renunciation and outward non-involvement, can attain perfection. Whenever the Spirit of God descends upon you, however, remember the words of Jesus, me ye have not always with you. Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind.
Okay. This week's story is about Judas. Last week's story was about Judas, and that's a little weighty. So I thought we'd start with a joke. And this joke requires your participation. So, how many gurus does it take to change a light bulb? Who knows? I'm not going to ask you. Okay, only one. But the light bulb has to really want to change. And we need to really want to change in order to attract a guru into our life. There's a great difference between a guru and spiritual teachers, and they're both very necessary. Spiritual teachers explain things, and try to do it very precisely. Where do you put your head and your elbow, and how do you breathe, and what to think, and the 26 points of this theory. But a spiritual guru, changes our consciousness. And he does that in ways that we don't expect. Many people think, perhaps most people think, having read the autobiography, I wish I had been with Yogananda. I would have asked him so many questions. But he didn't let the disciples ask him questions. When he had guests and visitors, they could ask all the questions they wanted to. But the disciples, he asked them to be in silence when they were in his presence, because his way of teaching them was through silence and by transmitting consciousness. Yogananda said, I hate to scold you. I prefer to work just through a glance, through a smile, through a word, through just the littlest thing to help you go in the right direction. In this story of Judas, which I'm going to tell you a little more about now, what we see is that the spiritual guru, instead of explaining things to us, will put us into situations or let our tendencies put us into situations with other people in which we come to see more about ourselves, our character, our characteristics, and help us to understand where it is that we need to change, where we need to put our efforts. One of Yogananda's great disciples, Sister Gyanamata, said, "It is not so much the light we see and the joy we feel in meditation that tells us how much spiritual progress we're making. It is how we act in the cold light of day." And this tells us so much when we see ourselves in relationship to other people, to other devotees, to the world, to life circumstances. How do we act? How do we react? And how can the Guru at that moment enter into our lives and into our hearts and change us? With this in mind, let's look at this very interesting story where Judas and Mary and the other disciples are with Christ. And the men disciples are sitting there. It doesn't say in the Bible what they're doing, but they're just sitting doing whatever they're doing. And all of a sudden, the door opens and Mary walks in. Now, this is Mary's house. Again, we're with Mary, Martha, and Lazarus. You know, the very good friends and probably the cousins of Jesus. So Mary walks in and she's carrying this spikenard, which is an herb, actually a mixture of herbs that is put on the body when it dies before the body is wrapped in the shroud. But Mary comes in with this ointment and she goes right up to Jesus in the middle of all of those disciples not having been invited, and she kneels down and she anoints the feet of Jesus with these herbs, with this ointment. And then she bends down and takes her hair and dries his feet. Now, what an incredible action that was. I mean, can you just picture it? Can you imagine what it required of Mary to do that inwardly, her attunement? Why did she take the ointment that was being saved for the burial and use it? I think something deep inside of her knew that Jesus wasn't going to need that ointment for his burial, that he was not going to stay buried, that the body didn't need to be preserved because it would be resurrected. She was so deeply in tune with her master that she knew that. And she wanted to let Jesus know that she knew that. And what courage it took for her to walk into that room of men and perform that act and open herself up to criticism, which came, and where did it come from? It came from Judas. Judas, the most intelligent of all the disciples. Judas, who was the keeper of the treasury. Judas, who was soon going to betray Jesus. And we see the seeds of his betrayal in what he says. And he does not reproach Mary. Who does Judas reproach? Jesus, his guru. Can we imagine this? He turns to his guru and he says, "Why are you letting her waste this spikenard on you? Why don't we sell it instead and get money and give the money to the poor?" Now, this was just a facade. I mean, Judas, as we know from the Bible, was very attached to money. In fact, money was his undoing. All of us have some attachments. And perhaps money is a little bit on the bad side because it gives us, what should we say, the opportunity for all kinds of indulgences and diversions that take us away from God. So Judas has the presumption, the pride to scold his own guru, to say, "I know better than you do, and this is what should be done." Now, Jesus doesn't respond to that. He responds to a very deep, something deep-seated in Judas, but not only in Judas. How many of us here are going to betray our guru? Well, actually, that's another question. We think that we won't, but possibly we do. every day, betray what He has asked us to do, betray what we have promised to do. There's so many little betrayals, but that was last week, and that was Ram's service, and I'm glad he got that one, and I got this one. But Jesus responds and says something which has both an obvious and a more esoteric meaning. And he says, "The poor you have always with you, but me you will not always have." So what is he saying there? He is, of course, predicting his death, which is coming up quite soon after this situation. And what he is saying is, why are you worried about doing things for the poor, for those who are needy, for those who are in trouble, when right now these are the last days of my life, and you should be focused on serving me and receiving through your service my consciousness. I am here in this moment, shortly before my passing, to endow you with the power of my consciousness so that you can serve as Christ in the world and share these teachings with other people. So, is this a message for us? I think it is. Now, Jesus was talking to his close and advanced disciples, and through them, he's talking to us. Is it not a good thing to serve the poor people, those who are disadvantaged, either economically or because they have poor health or psychologically disadvantaged? Is this not a good thing to do? We know it's a good thing to do. To do service, this is to do seva. But there are so many people who are qualified to do that. Perhaps even more qualified than we are to do that. What can we as devotees do to serve humanity? And what Jesus is saying is, serve humanity through the grace that is coming to you from me, through you. Devotees have a unique opportunity of transmitting the grace of God to other people. And Jesus is saying, don't forget this. Don't let all of your attention be focused on other things, good though they might be. Service to the poor, to the disadvantaged, whom we have always with us, that will never change, will bring us good karma. And it's good to have good karma. It helps us to overcome our bad karma. But it will not give us God. It will not permit us to soar in God. And this is what Jesus is saying in this moment. Guru Seva, to attune ourselves to what the Guru, our Guru, your Guru, has come to do, and to become an instrument for that service, because that service is what will free us. Not the service that we decide we want to do, the service that is good, the service that is in tune with our past karma, in tune with our talents, but the service that is asked of us by our Guru. Now Mary, we've seen Mary in relationship to Judas in this situation, where her service is through great attunement and great devotion. She has great courage and intuition. We've seen Mary in relationship to Martha. Do you remember that? Where Martha, as Jesus said, you are careful and troubled about many things. But Mary has chosen the better part, and it will not be taken away from her. So often on the spiritual path, we think that we can get to God only by doing outward activities and service, which again is so important. But it's our deep inner communion. It's those moments in which we are touching God consciousness that will change us, and through us will change the world. And everything that we do, even though we do it in God's name, will be taken away from us, won't it? When we die. Will it matter? Will God ask us, how many books have you written? How many films have you produced? How many songs have you sung? Will God care? Will He ask us that? As Swami says, when we get into that light, there will be only one question. How much have you loved me? And that will not be taken away from us. When we can enter deeply into that one and only important relationship where we're loving God with every breath, with everything we're doing, with every activity, that it be an activity of love, an offering of love. And so Yogananda is saying, serve, but serve in the right way. Not just thinking about outward things, who needs our service, but thinking about our attitude of service. Only one thing is needful. And the Mary in us, the deep devotee, knows that. So how can we rise into God consciousness? I'd like to offer 2 other suggestions of how we can make the most of this incredible opportunity that we've been given to be born here on earth and to have all of the advantages that we do. We are so advantaged. How can we make the most of it and go quickly into God consciousness? Lahiri Mahashaya said many wonderful things. And one of the quotes that comes often to my mind is this one. He says, all time is wasted that is not spent in seeking God. He also said, everything else can wait, but our search for God cannot wait. As Jesus said, seek ye first the kingdom of God, and everything else will be given to you. And so often we think it's the other way around, that once we have everything we need to be comfortable, to be secure, to be successful, then we can seek the kingdom of God. But it's the other way around. And we don't want to waste any moment in our life. We want every minute to count. Why should our spiritual progress be that half hour or even 2 hours or 3 that we spend in meditation, when it can be 24 hours? How often do you hear people say, or perhaps you've said yourself, of some duty that you have, some empeño, ¿cómo se dice empeño? Commitment. Some commitment that you've made. You say, I'm doing this job and it's 24/7. Well, 24/7 is a wonderful thing, not for us to be distracted, but for us to have our minds focused on God in everything that we do. Our commitment to the path of self-realization can be 24/7 if we don't waste 1 minute of our time. Which means that in everything we do, we want to do it for the love of God. Not because it's challenging, not because we're able to do it, but because we're doing it as an offering to God. One thing that's so helpful as we go through all of our duties and activities is to keep the name of God in our mind. And this practice is called japa, the inward repetition of the name of God, or the thought of God, that you are with me in this moment. I used to, when I was living at the meditation retreat at Ananda, and it's a big forest, and it was the very first year, and almost nobody was there. It was really very scary. And for some reason, every time I'd go walking in the forest, I'd be afraid of bears. And I'd go walking anyway, and I knew that I really had to overcome the fear. So I was walking and walking and walking, and getting more and more afraid. And finally, I came upon an affirmation that I've used ever since then. And it's this: wherever I am, you are here. So why should I be afraid? I mean, is there anywhere we can be in any situation where God is not going to be there, guiding us, protecting us, if that's what we want, if that's what we are affirming? So this is an example of the practice of japa, always keeping our mind focused on God in everything that we're doing. How can we do all of the things we need to, that require concentration, that require energy, that cause us to be stressed and overwhelmed? How can we do that and still be inward and meditative? It's a matter of remembering, of carrying that thought of God everywhere we go. Swami Kriyananda tells about a sadhu, a spiritual, wandering spiritual seeker, who he met in India, and he took the picture of this man, and I always remember this picture. It's so, I can't describe it to you. It's so joyful. It's just a man sitting on a step with his head a little to the side, with this gorgeous smile on his face, and you know just by looking at him that he is in God. And Swami tried to engage him in conversation, like, who are you and where are you from and what you do. Everything that Swami asked him, the man would just smile and say, Om Guru. Om Guru. Didn't matter what Swami said. He couldn't get the man to say anything else but Om Guru. That's a wonderful way to live and work 24/7. I love doing that when I go out and run. I like to run every day. And I spend that time, with our gurus. I'll pick one or two or three, and I'll just run, going Om Babaji, and focusing that energy. Babaji's the patron saint of our film, so I run with him a lot, ask him to give me inspiration, open some doors. But I just try to feel also an energizing that consciousness of God is getting in every single cell of the body, just so permeated that there's nothing else there. There's a sweet story about Lord Rama. Do you know Rama? He was an incarnation of God. And it's a very long story, but I'll tell you just one tiny part. He had this army, and he was going to find his wife who had been kidnapped. Okay, so that's enough of the story for now. His wife is kidnapped, and he has an army. And the head of this army is his great devotee, whose name is Hanuman. Okay. Now, the army is made up of, and it's very complicated and symbolic, but it's made up of monkeys and bears. And Hanuman is the general of the army, and he's this huge monkey. But you may notice that when there's lots of thousands and thousands of monkeys, it's hard to tell them apart, one from another. So one night, all of the army is asleep on the ground. They're under the little covers, whatever they had. And news comes a spy comes back to Rama and says, we have found your wife. We know where she is. Gather the army. So Rama has to go and find Hanuman to tell him first and to give him the battle plan. But he doesn't know where he's sleeping, because he's sleeping with all of the other monkey soldiers. But Ram is not worried, because he knows he can find Hanuman. And he goes to each soldier, and he puts his ear over the chest of the soldier. And at each soldier, he hears ba-boom, ba-boom, ba-boom. He hears the heartbeat of the soldier. And he says, this isn't wrong, this isn't wrong. And he goes around, and when he comes to this one soldier, and he puts his ear over the chest, what he hears is, Rama, Rama, Rama. He says, this is Hanuman. It wasn't a heartbeat. His heart was beating his love for God. And so Ram wakes him up, just like we want God to wake us up from our delusion, and says, come, I have the battle plan for you. And it's the Guru when he finds the devotee whose heart is totally given to him, gives us our battle plan, our sadhana, and what to do. There's another story that helps us understand how in the world we can keep our mind totally focused on God and at the same time do what we need to do. And this is the story of a little boy. His name is Sukdeva. And if I'm not mistaken, Sukdeva was the son of Vyasa. And as a small child, he was only 6 years old, he already wanted to have a guru and study. And so Vyasa says, well, son, I am Vyasa. I can teach you. And his little son looks at him and he says, Father, you have delusion. You're attached to me. I want to go and study with somebody else. And those of you who have children know that as much love as we give them, there are some things we can't teach them. So Vyasa says, all right, I'm going to send you to the court of King Janaka, who was a great king of that time. And Sukdeva says, no, I don't want to go to a king. A king is worldly. I want to go study with a great sage. And Vyasa says, I'm sending you to Janaka. He can teach you what you need. And so he takes him to the palace, and he leaves him. And the little boy, Sukdeva, comes into the presence, the audience of King Janaka. And Janaka welcomes him and says, I'm very happy to teach you, but you need to earn the right to be here. And Sukdeva then says, well, I'm the son of Vyasa. And Janaka says, that's not good enough. So I'm going to test you. And Janaka takes 2 vases, 2 containers, and he fills them to the brim with oil, right to the brim. And he says to Sukdeva, put out your hands. And on each palm he places the oil vase. And he says to Sukdeva, your test is to walk through all of the rooms of my palace, and there are more than 100 rooms, without spilling a drop of this oil, and come back to me and tell me everything you have seen. And so there's Sukdeva, and it's full to the brim, and he walks, very slowly. And he walks up the stairs, and he goes to this room and that room. He's hardly breathing. It takes him hours. And he comes back to the king, and he says, I didn't spill a drop. And King Janaka said, describe to me the music room on the 3rd floor. And Sukdeva said, what music room? And Janaka said, you have not passed the test yet. The test was, don't spill a drop and describe to me in detail everything you have seen. So Sukdeva goes out again, holding the vases, and this time as he goes, he looks, and he sees every single thing that's there. And he comes back, and he describes the whole palace to King Janaka. And Janaka says, fine, you've passed the test. You are able now to be a true deep yogi. So what does that test mean for us? In the autobiography, it says that those yogis who live in the world and perform their duties without attachment are following the highest path to God realization. Well, this is where we are. We are in the world. And we want to remember Sukdeva, that we never let one drop of the oil of our devotion spill when we are doing what we need to do with our family, our children, that we are always full to the brim with the love of God, that love that Mary was offering constantly at the feet of her guru, Jesus. And at the same time, with the oil of that devotion, we do everything that we need to do. And that is the perfect balance of the yogi who lives in the world. And that is how we rise. That is how we soar in God. Yogananda said the minutes are more important than the years. Let us make every minute count, full to the brim with love and devotion for God, open to His guidance as to how He wants us to serve Him, which may not be how we might want to serve Him. And let that grace flow through us. And that grace, just like the oil, will touch all souls with God's love. I'd like to end by reading a whisper from eternity. This is to help us to remember to keep whispering to God. This is called Demand for the Opening of the Spiritual Eye to Find God in Everything. My eyes are enthralled, O Father, with the beauty of earthly flowers, with life's passing scenes, and with the sailing silent clouds. Everywhere all I see hints at of thy hidden presence. Open that eye in me which sees only thee. With that gaze may I behold thee above, beneath, all around, within and outside me. Teach me in all things to see only thee. Open in me that eye which beholds everywhere thy hidden but ever subtly reigning wonder. Om. Amen.
The mountains, Please give us the sky. Nightly when starlight enfolds us, peace is its lullaby. Please give us the morning. Please give us a song. Bird songs that call us to welcome. Day and fresh labors begun. Please give us the seasons. Please give us the rain. Cool clouds that gather to bless us. Mist hands that soothe away pain. Please give us our heart's love. Please give us our smiles. Rays of thy presence within us. Light that all strive.